Good morning. This is Morten from INKISH TV, and this is our very first webinar event ever. So bear with us if we have technical issues and if everything is just messed up. See, the thing is that when I am standing in front of an audience, I always feel very comfortable because I can see people, I can sense the feedback, I can sense basically everything. And now I'm talking to a screen. And while I am talking, I am waiting for the first presenter here at our Learn With Us. And I just look forward to this one. I hope it will be very interesting. I can tell you that the program we have done is in times where there's so many webinars around that how can you attract an audience for a show like this? And we wanted to be a little bit back to basics. And basically, when you hear the first session with Kit Tomshøj from PrintVis, PrintVis is a software for ERP MIS system. And you could think of them, maybe they want to spend the time presenting the products, and no, they don't. They have decided to give you an introduction to how you calculate prices and how the full cost model works. And it's a quite exciting presentation. And I also know, because I saw it yesterday, that there will be some introductions to new features that I have not seen in any MIS ERP system before. So I hope it will be exciting. And after the session with Kit, and I can see that Kit just joined us. Hello, Kit.
Hey.
So I had just been talking about all the things that you're going to present. So you don't have to present anything anyway.
That's nice. Thank you.
No, that's not true. So Kasper and Kit, welcome to Learn With Us here on INKISH. It's as I presented just a moment ago, this is the first time we're doing a show like this. So I hope everybody will bear with us. I'm pretty sure you are as nervous as I am, because I know that as I just said before, standing in front of a crowd or standing in front of an audience or talking to customers that is not difficult, because that is what we do, right? But to talk to a screen and pretend that we are wise people, I think that is a challenge in many ways, right? So
don't worry, we're in the IT business. We have coffee and then we'll fake the rest. No problem.
I do have coffee too, so thank you very much. Before we get started with the presentation, and I just want to tell everybody that the presentation has been pre-recorded because you also have one of your American colleagues, Michael Bradley, along, and I think that it would be too evil to wake him up at this time, right? So who is PrintVis and what makes you different?
Well, PrintVis, in this industry, we are called and we are labeled an MIS vendor. So in a normal day, we say we do ERP systems, but we've given up that fight over words many years ago. So we do an MIS system. We come out from the Microsoft family, so that makes us a little different. We don't, we started out from the ERP system, started out from the Microsoft ERP system, and has been focusing on the printing industry for 20 plus years, something like that. And so our daily day is constantly looking at all the boring things about numbers and stuff like that, right? All the things that's needed to make sure that the printing companies, the packaging companies are actually running and making sure that they get paid and making sure that they can actually administer the business.
I mean, that sounds pretty, it sounds like something that everybody should already have, but I know from previous conversations that you still experience companies that are not using these kind of softwares, using spreadsheets, even pen and paper, right? So I think that your opportunities in the market are still quite large, right?
We are still very positive, yes. I mean, we still see now that typically printing packaging companies will use a variety of smaller systems. So typically, I don't know what, yes, spreadsheets for something, pen and paper for something else, and then 5, 6, 7 different systems for managing their inventory, their planning, their estimation, their quoting, their what have you. So that's, if you start looking at what do we actually use of software, in a lot of companies you'll see that a huge range of all different kind of softwares.
And talking about this, just to let people understand, I mean, you are obviously out of Denmark, same as we are, but you have offices in different places around the world. You're a global supplier, so where are you located?
We are right now, like you, sitting in Denmark. We have offices in Singapore and in US. We have people basically spread around the globe. I think we have customers in 32, 33 countries, something like that.
And you're smiling, and I was just about to say only 32 countries. We hope maybe one more or 2 more countries could come along during this presentation.
Yes,
Yeah.
We're always looking. Yeah.
So
we have our company spread with employees sitting all over Europe, and in Singapore and in the US. So.
And if we look at very shortly before we see the presentation of what you have prepared, Kit, and how is the competitive situation? Is it a very competitive market that you are in, or how is that from your perspective?
It depends. It's very, very different from country to country. In some countries there are a lot of local systems. And fighting against about the same customers, doing different areas of the administration of the ERP side, and in other countries we only see one or two competitors. So it's in the Microsoft world where we come from, we don't see any competition. So we're the Microsoft alternative for this industry, which is.
That must be a very nice sweet spot to be in. But I have a suggestion now, because we have to get started learning something. It's nice to see you guys, but we need to learn something, right? So I suggest that you turn off your camera and your microphone, and then we will show the presentation, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And just for everybody to understand, this presentation is about, is it 20 minutes, Kit, or something like that?
Yeah, about 17, 18 minutes.
Okay, and then we have time for a Q&A afterwards, and I will be the one that asks you some of the difficult questions, but if anybody has anything, the chat is open, or you can even, for the audience, you can even click on the little hand in the lower corner where you can request to speak if you want to talk to us live. So everybody is very welcome, but let's see the film, right?
Get it.
Many years ago, the calculation of print was simply done with pen and paper, and to make it easier on the estimator, who was often a business owner or a manager, quotes were often given in prices or 1,000 prices or price lists. Later, spreadsheets helped simplify and organize complex calculations, and eventually computers and MIS systems emerged and became affordable. These days, online business is thriving, and this makes it really important for us to be able to automate our estimates. The most important thing when calculating a production quote, and to do it automatically, is to know your basis of calculation. Your decision must rely on solid and confirmed data. You have to know your true costs. Direct costs are all expenses which are directly required to produce an actual item we're going to sell. For example, raw materials like paper and ink, as well as the value of actual time spent on a printing press, for example. Overhead can loosely be divided into 2 types, fixed and variables. The fixed overhead costs are those incurred while running a business, but which are not directly linked to production. Examples would be monthly rent, utilities, and company cars for salespeople. For variable, We understand that some of the overhead costs will decrease if production is slow, and likewise will increase when production is active. If all production in a company is sold at break-even, the company would see neither profit nor loss. All vendors, staff and management are paid, and bank loans are maintained on schedule. Some may consider this an acceptable result, but it of course will not do in the long run, especially if the company is listed on the stock market. With the advent of the new MIS systems, the use of the total cost principle became manageable for an ordinary printing company. This means we go from learning our break-even from accounting after production to now intelligently calculating our break-even in every single job we quote. Here's a very simple pricing model for a job. To be able to calculate a quoted price on a printed product, we must be able to apply the same principle to all services and all items included in the production. We also understand that as quantities and characteristics of a product change, so may every detail in the estimation. And so it becomes imperative to know what we actually do in each stage of the production. Hourly rates. At this stage, it's very important to be realistic in budgets and forecasts of production. When we get it wrong, the company will continuously lose money. It can be challenging to determine with all the individual jobs. Often a substantial period needs to pass before the company can obtain an accurate overview of the correctness of their budgets. A major part of getting our cost rates correct is to calculate our overhead costs and distribute the weight of these to the cost centers on the production floor. There are almost only active production orders to pay for overhead costs. The rest of it will be surcharges to items that we use in production. In a very simple model, it becomes very evident for us what matters most, and that is how many hours we have actually sold rather than how much capacity we really have. For each individual machine, it becomes important to distribute a portion of the business overhead so that we can have our costs covered at the end of the year. The important thing is to find a realistic balance for each cost center. If the overall structure is out of balance, we will see a loss. Of course, it's easy and logical with just a single cost center, but when we apply this method to all production equipment, it can easily get complex. The process is of course more complicated and entails a lot of components to be sorted out and assessed individually. This is a vital task for management to create and review regularly, and it can be downright difficult. Some consultancy agencies exist specifically to help with this, and some MIS systems have such assistance built right in. Even so, after the analysis of the underlying structures, there's still an element of salesmanship to the final distribution of the burdens, because the market will always have an impact on what you can realistically expect to get at various cost centers. Some facts are evident from contracts and mortgages and physical footprint. Your warehouse costs should also be considered, such as amortization of your capital tied into paper stock, employees, trucks, and so forth. These things are then added up and distributed to cost centers on the active production area, the actual open hours, and the projected capacity usage. A nice benefit to a software solution is that it can be preset and then repeated quite easily. When all is done, this methodology will suggest the optimum distribution for each cost center. Though once again, you will probably still need to apply some old-fashioned salesmanship as a final touch. The focus on cost drivers for actual activities and services tied up to a product is called activity-based costing. Here we have two examples from very different industries, but with the same line of thought. Just as in other businesses, we can pinpoint the production flow for each little activity and determine a price. For each process, we can now examine the cost drivers and conditions, and we can try to say what makes the machine go faster or slower. Once we can say with certainty what happens if, then we can start automating our calculation. We can also start considering customer options. Will they require being on site for a press check? This has a cost consequence, extra time where the job is on the press, with the machine standing still as we discuss the job with the customer. So, an extra charge to the customer should be factored. Let's dive into the costing activities on the printing machine. For each press, we would itemize the activities needed in the process of this machine into parts where we can predict the quantity and the speed automatically. In this example, we have the basic steps of a printing press, and each step has to be automated of the time calculation based on our best knowledge. Quantities are based on formulas, and run speeds are obtained from either speed table setup or a fixed value. It is quite important to evaluate each production step to see if this is a one-time make-ready cost or if it also applies to an additional quantity, which means that when the ordered quantity changes, this line will also change in cost value. Speed tables can be very simple, like this one, or more complex, incorporating formats, item qualities, and other details. A good rule of thumb is to keep things as simple as possible and only consider the most important variables. MIS systems have more or less complex scrap table setups. Plate scrap setup and running scrap vary the most, and so should be more carefully considered. While the system is focused on the details, on special situations and conditions which will impact production time, as well as material used to arrive at the cost of the product, we have simultaneously calculated a potential sales price for our quote. The MIS system does that for us. On the sales side, we encounter further complications: customers. Customers will demand price breaks, special pricing on some items or deliverables, and other variables that will disrupt standards in your pricing model. But with a little more specific setup in the MIS, agreed pricings in certain situations can be managed. Let's look at some examples of what your MIS system will do for you. I've asked Michael to give us a look inside PrintVis.
Here we are on a quick quote screen in PrintVis, with a customer and contact selected. We choose a product group for this quote request, in this case a brochure. Now we're going to further define it by choosing from some preset product configurations, a saddle-stitched brochure. We give the job a name, and then enter a quantity, which you can see updates the standard description field below, and automatically pulls in a basic template for the selected product. Because this is a generic template, we need to manually input the number of text pages as well as enter a final format size. The template is a pre-selected paper for the brochure cover, but for the text only the normal paper weight and quality is applied, so we'll choose a specific paper from our list. Having entered these base parameters, the product is further configured by replying to a simple and easy to understand questionnaire. Artwork is entered for 3 hours, and lamination is added to the cover. Finally, an extra quantity break of 10,000 pieces is entered, and then the job is calculated. A regular case with the 2 quantities has been created in the background. Now the required text for the included finishing is added to the estimate. Looking into the actual estimation created, you'll see all of the added processes, for example the times and ink quantities for the cover. And for the cross-folding, the different quantities are automatically calculated. When satisfied, the quote document is generated, applying field content from the case to a Word document. The generated Word document can now be made into a PDF and emailed to the customer.
Thank you. If we've gone through all the hard work of defining all costs to the detail, it would be really nice if this effort pays off in the end. It does, and one of the situations where it becomes evident is when you want to compare different versions of a job. I've also very kindly asked Michael to show us an example of that.
Here we are building another quote request. We can see our quantity of 12,500 brochures, 32 pages, 20 by 28 format with a 4-page cover, show our final format, and 4/4 color. If we take a look at the job card, we're presented with the current overview of the sales price and the fine details that have gone into this calculation, including our anticipated direct cost, the planned contribution margin, net profit, and more. Now let's say the customer wants an option to add lamination. When we go into the estimating card, we can simply key in the unit code for lamination and see that it's automatically placed in the correct process order. And we can see that the additional time and associated costs have been added to the pricing. And now we're shown the direct difference in pricing options from 67 to 68.81 just by selecting the individual lines. We can also easily create options for other ordered quantities. Type in 20,000 and the system will automatically calculate that. If we take a look at the decision overview window, we can drill down into the details of the pricing for all 3 quote options. Here we're reviewing just the totals, but we can look further into the levels for more details on things like profit margin, direct cost of materials, labor, and much more. Now if we want to extract the detailed price difference specifically for the lamination part, we can use the totaling filter to narrow down to that specific view. And when applied, we can see on the right side that we're given the specific totals that the system has calculated. In this simple example, only for the cost of adding lamination. But clearly PrintVis can take you from a rich overview down to the most minute pricing details of even the most complex estimates, so that you can make better pricing decisions.
It is so nice to know your costs and prices to the detail. But suppose your customer is looking at a more complex picture than just your quotation. The buying behavior and what the customer wants to pay is driven by a whole lot of other factors. Well, of course it helps to see clearly where your break-even is, even though you aspire to make a profit. Wouldn't it be great to know more about what the customer is actually willing to pay for it? Suppose they would be willing to pay more than you would quote? 30 years ago, the business owner would often know by gut feeling what the price should be, given that the customer circle was smaller and more loyal, as there were no internet. Nowadays, the picture is more complex, the turnover time from quote to acceptance is shorter, and customers are not so loyal. Of late, MIS systems are beginning to utilize artificial intelligence in predicting the price point which will give the customer acceptance. Imagine that we try to replicate the years of experience of a seasoned estimator by feeding information about the last thousands or even hundred thousands of print companies' quotes and orders into a powerful supercomputer and use all this data to train an artificial intelligence model. At PrintVis, we are using Microsoft Azure machine learning for this. Now we can look at the estimated sales price based on our costing setup from a totally different perspective. With an AI model based on options such as product groups, specific and general customer preferences, season, delivery conditions, etc., the print company's own historical data will be used to evaluate the probability that the customer will accept this price, and even project the customer's reaction if we increase or lower the price. Finding the right price has been a theme for hundreds of years. Technology has been helpful in driving advances that we have made, and even as we are looking to the future, technology and management information systems is in constant development. Thank you for watching this video session, and we would like to invite you to our website if you want to know more about PrintVis.
Wow.
We're back.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
And you're drinking coffee still. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm not sure I said that clearly before we started, but Kasper and Kit, maybe you should also check the chat, because there came some quite good questions during the. Oh, you don't have a keyboard. Computer company without a keyboard. So when you're using Navision and PrintVis, does it have a keyboard input, or is it only by mental power, or?
It's only by that's all it is, right?
Okay.
We're now in our huge conference room, which has been very empty the last few months.
Oh yeah.
Now we're back here, and I have a keyboard somewhere around.
But I think I have prepared some questions as well. But before we go to those questions, maybe we should, because we have a guy here, John Robin, and he sent it actually to me as a private message. I hope it's okay, John Robin, to post it here as a question to Kasper and Kit. He's just saying, in case of offset, the ink coverage, is that factored into a case of digital production, or is there any difference in digital and offset parameters to cost based on coverage? If I should try to consider what you're thinking, is that one of at least some of the issues that you have with for example, if you go inkjet, is how do you calculate the ink coverage on jobs to make as accurate estimations as possible?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a very good question. From the MIS systems, what we do anyways is that we have a preset coverage and a preset usage of square meters per kilo or pound of ink, which is set on the ink itself, on the item card. That can be overwritten in each specific job, so that you can adjust the coverage as to how full is the print when you do it. That is the same for both inks and toners from our perspective. And then on toners, and there's also a question of short run offset. On the other hand, as those are sometimes fairly small quantities, for the job costing part of it, we typically that's typically a cost that we tend to flush. So whatever was pre-calculated is also what is flushed into the job costing. It's it's more time and more effort and cost to record it than it is to really use it.
I think that one of the reasons why this question, in my opinion, is also very important is because if you look at, for example, digital presses like inkjet presses, the price on ink is considerably higher than on inkjet. And I was also thinking from what you said, but also from more like generic thinking is you mentioned the AI as part of your sales price training kind of thing. What about estimation? Because I was thinking that often when you give a quote to customer, you don't know the ink coverage in advance, right? So I was just thinking that maybe that makes sense to say that, okay, if you have a lot of jobs printed on this device, you get like some kind of intelligence that when this customer is asking for a quote, we know that on average we use like this X percentage of ink. Is that something that you're considering or do? I mean
the new hot topic for every ERP system right now is the usage of artificial intelligence. I mean, this is what's going to be the next step in, and right now, since we were focusing on costing and sales price, we were presenting a little on what we do there. But AI is used, and is going to be used more and more everywhere in production to forecast what stock to buy, what inventory to use, but definitely also to analyze the jobs that you have been running, to see things like that exactly, can we try to guess, can we try to give a better forecast of, instead of just having a standard preset coverage, could we try to use some AI to look into different types of job, different customers, whatever you have in, what you can get there. But I should say very often it's information we also get through the integration with some of the pre-press systems.
Of course. So if you have, for example, a pre-press system that typically renders the jobs and get an understanding of ink coverage, that is where you basically get the inputs from the devices into your. Okay. John Robin, he has a I don't know if it's a follow-up question, but a very good one as well, because he's asking, can we have same job multiple cost for digital and offset for short runs?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. That was the easy one.
Yeah, that's we do individual setup, right? And we set up the way that the machine is typically running. And you can also have alternatives where you can say, I want to have some certain things that I want to have calculated, but may not want to join or have in my end estimate. I can calculate things, information that allows me to compare two different versions or ways of producing, and still have a sort of an easy way of comparing what's the better way.
So one thing is obviously the technology used, and as far as I saw from Michael Bradley's presentation, when you had like the cost options, that was basically that if you have more types of equipment, then you can combine and see, okay, this I can make that profit on, and if I use that machine, and sometimes you can have like last minute decisions because of utilization, or it's occupied, or it's down for service, or whatever, right? Another question that is again from John Robin, and there are questions from other people as well, but he is a very good one here. He is about how about optimum paper size estimation calculation for books, either on 17 times 100 or 64 times 90. Do we have options? And I know the answer is that is correct, because I've seen that in a previous printing company I used to work for. Can you explain a little, because Kit, you gave a very good presentation on the mathematics and the logics behind the calculations, but this is a very specific question about how you calculate prices. I mean, you optimize on devices, on papers, and on bindings and things like that. Can you explain a little bit about how you do that, and what is it you offer?
When we give input for a new print job in our system, the system can be preset. Not everyone likes that, but can be set up so that it will suggest an optimum paper size. And then within a quality, you give in a paper quality, thickness, and so on, what you would like, and then it will pick and what it thinks is an optimum within your existing items in your inventory list. But that's what it does, and it does that based on an optimum layout that it suggests, like a normal 16-pager, etc. And if we do a 16-pager here, then the optimum size, because this is a cut format, for example, would be so and so. If that is not available, it's going to take the smallest paper that will apply to those criteria.
Yeah. But again, I like to put a comment on that, because what we also see now, which is quite interesting, is that we do see more and more companies trying to start working with some standard formats, instead of looking isolated at one job and say, what is the optimal paper size for that job, meaning what will give me the how will I utilize the paper most. We see more and more companies starting working with some standard sizes, which for just looking at one job perhaps will not be what you learn from the textbook, the optimal paper size, but in the long run it will mean that you can have jobs without that many changes and so on. So actually we see companies that start really focusing on that, actually making some good profit on that.
That reminds me of a thing I have been curious about for some time, is because when print runs are for sure falling, and I think that extends a little bit to what you're saying, Kasper, is the fact that that if you change paper size, and let's say that you have dispersion varnish on your offset machine, then you have also to take into consideration that the change of blankets, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that something that you also consider? So let's say that we have a very, very short run print job, and then basically it could, if from a pure mathematical textbook example, could be a one paper format. But you also know that right now you're running another paper format, and do you have those kind of intelligence built into it as well?
I mean, we're moving now. Now this session, we focus solely on cost estimation, right? I mean, the entire ERP platform covers a lot of other areas. So we would look into how can you bundle jobs, how can you in your scheduling look at how to bundle jobs precisely, so you actually try to minimize the cost, minimize the changes, minimize the paper change, etc., etc. That's
cool.
Yeah.
Angelo, he's asking template read square application-based quotation. Is that available?
Yes, I think that is exactly what was shown in the video here. There you have some base templates that are framing what a normal job within a certain product category would be. So we have customers that have hundreds and hundreds of templates. Just as you have in your pre-press systems, you'll have hundreds and hundreds of templates. That's very convenient. And then we just group them into product categories, product groups.
Cool. Another Robert, that is not John Robin, but Robert, he is asking or commenting, the machine learning mentioned is interesting. Do they work, I mean, you work with the manufacturers of the equipment for valid data?
Yes and no. Yes, because yes, we do work with the different manufacturers of the equipment. With JDF integration and other integration measurements on machines and so on, we get real feedback from the machines. So yes, we do, and that part, the valid registration from the equipment, is very interesting when we want to look at our production and see how we can optimize it and evaluate if our costing structure is correct. That was a yes. The reason I said no was that the example we talked about here is another area of using machine learning, which is actually try to go totally on the customer side and see, well, let's try, instead of looking at the production, instead of looking at how can we do this most optimal and so on, this is what your costing calculation should be. Then let's try to feed some of the supercomputers we can use now for artificial intelligence. Let's try to feed them with the data the customer knows. I mean, of all your thousands of orders that you have had in the past, so your own orders, but with the parameters that the customer know. You know, what are they ordering, what customer is it, what geography is it, what time of year, what is the delivery horizon, what kind of paper, etc., etc. And try from that part to see what do we actually think, what is the probability that a customer would accept this quote. And looking from the customer perspective, he doesn't care anything about what your equipment has given a result. A customer doesn't care if you used it on one machine or the other. He's just looking at what he's ordering. And then we try to, at least we also use AI for something else, but that is the thing we try to describe here. Try to go in the customer's shoes. Try to get that, in Danish we say fingerspidsgefühl, right? Try to get that sense of what is this customer, what is the right price for this customer?
But Kasper, both you and I know that is one answer to the equation. But the other question could be, if you look at the AI for quotes, which is really great that you can take the data and figure out about that one. But I think that the question could be equally, if the market prices, whatever that is lower than you can produce it at, and then you had like equipment data, then it could also suggest you to what equipment to invest in, right?
Oh yes, definitely.
So that was like
one of the things you also see, which is actually quite fun when you start to analyzing, right? In most production companies, most printing companies, you would actually have some orders, hopefully not a big percentage, but you would actually have some orders where you do not make money. And if you can try to analyze these orders and anticipate which one is it. If you can just stop doing them, then you're actually making money by doing nothing. And that's something we really like, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think it will be maybe the last or second last question in this round from the chat group is again John Robin. He is very active. He says, sorry, you don't have to be sorry. This is great. Last one is imposition based on finishing, section soon or perfect bound to factor in folding and binding margins based on finish equipments. Does that resonate with you?
Yes, it does. We do take those parameters in when we make the layouts of the and the estimation of the optimum sizes. We do factor in those values. But we are an MIS system. We are not a pre-press system. So we do something that we try to cut it where we think it is likely or prudent that the estimator, the salesperson, whoever, knows, to a certain extent what to do, and then some pre-press things are applied afterwards. But we do take that information from the finishing, we do take into account the fold size and stuff like that.
Yeah, but sorry to interrupt you, that makes sense, but I think that, I don't think this is like about a pre-press question in that sense, because I think from my perspective, it's more like if you have section soon books or perfect bound books, you can have different usage of paper, right? So if you have that, you have to take a lot of considerations into to make that calculation. And I guess that is why people are asking this, because you really need to understand that that it does change also the binding on the total calculation, not just the finishing line, but also the paper usage, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, I'm sorry, we have to rush a little bit because we are on the very last minute, and I think we need to shout out to people that it's great that you're participating. Even Jacob Hedegaard Hummel from Heidelberg is commenting, and he is actually trying to throw in some promotions. So that's great, Jacob. He is promoting that Smart BI from Heidelberg should be the answer to some of the solutions. I don't know if you agree on that one, but I think that Smart BI looks really cool, and I think that your software looks really cool too. And
I comment because I saw Robert, who got up very early, and I think he deserves some answers. Thank you for that, Robert.
Yeah.
Typical time to implement is 30 to 40 days in an average small size company. That can be longer or shorter depending on the abilities that can come into the project from the customer side. And
you have no more time, Kit. You have to answer them in the chat here. So I'm sorry. No, I want to thank you very much for a really great presentation. I think it was really great to talk to you as well to get some answers. I think that we have covered most of them. I know there was a few questions I prepared that I didn't have time for, but then you have to, maybe will you share your presentation as well, or how's that?
Oh yeah, we will put that on our marketing will do that. Marketing will do something. There will be something. Okay,
or you can just put it in the files folder here next to you, and then it will be available for everybody who's joining here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time and for your pleasant company and sharing with us. That was totally cool. So thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye.
Great. Bye-bye.